I am very glad to be joined now by Melissa Nelson to talk about love, particularly from the perspective of her work and indeed life. She is a professor at Arizona State University and is both a scholar and an activist, particularly around, I think, what you might call native ecology and indigenous knowledge. And we're speaking in the context of investigations for a project looking at how designers can foster love in maybe processes, maybe objects at an individual, personal level, but also at the social, civic, and indeed ecological level. And so, Melissa, thanks so much for joining me. And I hope that our conversation will be illuminating, particularly focusing around this area of love and how the insights and the people that you know, the traditions that you work with, can illuminate and expand that idea. But let me just say hello and thanks very much to start with.
Oh, thank you so much, Mark. It's a pleasure to speak with you today on this really lovely topic.
So look, what I thought I could do is put a quote to you that you said, which seems to me to summarize a lot of areas that we might touch on, and then use that as a sort of springboard to get us going. And the quote is this. You said, "A worldview that understands indigeneity is a paradigm of regeneration, a worldview rooted in enduring values, in what we call our original instructions, common themes of reciprocity, of gratitude, of responsibility, of generosity, of forgiveness, of humility, of courage, of sacrifice, and of course, love." Now, that was the element, of course, that really struck my eye, given our conversation today. And then you say, but these are not just values. These values are not just words. We need to live them. So I'm hoping if we can just get some sense of what it might mean to live, particularly that last one you mentioned, of course, love, from the perspective of indigeneity, the original instructions. Could you start to unpack some of that for us? Maybe
Yeah,
what original instructions and indigeneity even might mean.
excellent. Thank you so much, Mark, for that. And yes, so I'm speaking as an Ojibwe or Anishinaabe or Chippewa person. We have three different names for our tribe, our nation. We're part of the larger Anishinaabe Confederacy of North America in the kind of central eastern part. So you'll hear me use those words, but we're all one people. Anishinaabe is our original, more cultural, spiritual word for ourselves that really means original being or spontaneous being or the beings descended from the spirits, from the creator. So that's a very sacred word for us. Ojibwe means to puckered up, and it's the type of moccasins we wore, and we're often called Ojibwe people in Canada. And then Chippewa is actually just a misinterpretation by the French of Ojibwe or Chippewa, and that's the legal term we use in the United States for our tribe. So I'm a member of the Turtle Mountain Chippewa tribe. So that's a little confusing, but that's indigeneity. We have our own languages, our own words for ourselves, and then we also have the words from the outsiders, of course. So I am mixed race. I'm Native American from my mother, Ojibwe, Cree, and Métis, the mixed race French Indian folks, and then I'm Norwegian from my father, so have European white settler heritage as well. So I'm kind of a bridge builder and really work along those different worldviews, those different histories, those different traditions. And so, speaking as an Ojibwe woman, we have our original instructions, which are really these values and these teachings that are often that were given to us and many tribes, not only in the Americas, but indigenous peoples all around the world have these stories from our creation myths, and all cultures and traditions have that, all religions. Usually they're in books, right? The holy books, the holy scripts, the holy texts. Being oral cultures, speaking and listening cultures, Our texts are the land. So the mountain range may remind us of a story. The river has many stories. A forest has many stories, the creatures there. And those stories tell us how to behave in those places, how to harvest the medicines and the food, how to make offerings, how to offer ceremonies. So those are all part generally of our original instructions. For me as an Ojibwe woman, when I go to a lake, I offer tobacco, not cigarettes in this desacralized way, but tobacco for us was a sacred medicine, used only ceremoniously to create agreements and treaties with each other. And so putting that little bit of tobacco into the lake is a way of providing a medicine and offering to the lake, and also asking for blessings when I go out in my canoe, that a big storm isn't going to come up and capsize me, or that I'll drown, that I'll have safe passage. So there's stories that remind me about that. And that's part of our original instructions. One of our most holy or sacred original instructions are the seven grandfather teachings. And in the quote you quoted me on, those recite many of those. And love is essential. Love is connected to the eagle, the beautiful eagle, both the golden eagle and the bald eagle, that soars above in the heavens, is in the sky between the earth realm and the spirit realm or the star realm. They have incredible vision. They can see the big picture. They're always looking for also threats, to see like how to maintain health and wellness and peace in the land. Eagle feathers are used for cleansing and healing. So there's many different teachings around the eagle, and each of our values are usually connected with animals, and that connects to this relational worldview. Indigenous peoples live in relational worldviews. That's why you often hear us at the beginning and ending all our relations. We honor our relatives, the kin. This is not just our human relatives, it's our animal relatives, our plant relatives. It's all those elements that give us life, the water that we drink in the morning, the breakfast we had, all the food, the plants and animals, the air that we breathe, the land that we walk on, the starlight at night, the moonlight at night that lights our way. Those are all relatives to us. So I think that's one of the biggest unique differences of what I often contrast, this Western worldview and then indigenous worldviews that really are rooted in relationality and kinship and a loving reciprocal relationship with our plants and animals. And that is quite a bit different than what we see in the hierarchical human exceptionalistic worldview that dominates a lot of Western thinking, not all, as you pointed out so beautifully, with poetry and different art forms, whether it's dance or poetry or music, that really evokes beauty. So for me and for a lot of Indigenous people and for designing, love is deeply connected with beauty, openness, a porosity, an invitation, a curiosity, spatially curvilinear form, like the woman, like the mother, the sacred mother. We come from the woman's body. We are nurtured by the bosom, by the breasts. These are all curvilinear. And in our worldview, the earth is a mother. She is nurturing. Her mountains are like those breasts. Her rivers and waters and caves are like that sacred origin place where we emerge from. So we do personify the earth, but we don't call it anthropocentrism. We are actually seeing the nurturing, maternal, beautiful qualities of the earth, just like human mothers or bear mothers or turtle mothers, right? That is a original instruction. There is a principle in the universe. We could even call it a natural law. There is a nurturing quality to the universe that is, for us, like a natural law, a universal principle that we can tap into. Using more Western terms, we may talk about, it's the infinite coming through the finite, and that the loving maternal qualities of nurturance that is a birthright of all life forms. That's one of our beliefs. It's a birthright of all life forms. And even rocks and so-called inanimate objects also can have nurturing qualities. So that's tapping into this field of love that is the matrix of the universe, really, in many different indigenous cosmologies. And and it's in many of the world religions. And so, how can we bridge that and see some of those qualities and again enact them so that we prevent war and conflict and violence? That's something that I'm very interested in and why I'm committed to environmental activism and indigenous rights activism too, to see the link, as Martin Luther King said, there's no justice without love and there's no love without justice. They really go together.
So would what one of in your bridging role there, that's this is very fascinating, and sort of interpreting indigenous insights and ways of being in the world through concepts like love and justice. Is that is that a natural move to make? Is Does it feel like a sort of contemporary way of bringing the original instructions into the modern world? I suppose in a way, it's very natural, um, from the Western point of view, to think that love is of supreme value. Would that be a way that indigenous peoples would talk as well?
I think so. I think definitely so. Certainly, again, with our Ojibwe, we're kind of known as lovers more than fighters, our tribe, even though we had fierce warriors in the past and battles. And the American Indian movement was found by Ojibwe warriors. But yes, we are deeply committed to love, deeply committed to a loving community, a loving kindness as a way to relate to each other, even our enemies, to really express a certain openness and understanding to find reconciliation when there is difference. So I think that's a very important one. But I also think even love in a Western concept way gets very abstract and very I guess, what would I say? It's a principle, it's theoretical, but then in action, for Native people are people of action, embodiment. We didn't historically have the written text the same way the West or the East did. Our language is in our actions, it's in the earth, it's in our rock art, it's in our pictographs, our petroglyphs, it's in our designs, our symbols, which are all symbolic of again relationships. So that reciprocity in relationship, love has to be enacted and embodied um, on the ground. It can't be just an abstract concept.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I love the sense that in an oral culture, the text, and I use that metaphorically as it were, as you say,
Yes,
written on the land, but
yeah,
it to come alive, it has to be sort of spoken, to be acted, to be shared, and
it
maybe through
does.
particular moments of the year and special rituals and so on. And it's very different from a written culture where the word comes alive in the individual, maybe in a very solitary way, and so lends itself more to that kind of abstraction. So that difference, it does feel very powerful
Exactly.
actually when you start to think about it.
That's right. And that's why even I also kind of bristled just at the idea of a universal concept, because what's appropriate for the Ojibwe in the Great Lakes is very different than the Hopi in the mesas and, the deserts in Arizona, or the, Javanchi in the Amazon in Brazil, or, the Sami in northern Norway in the Arctic with the caribou. So we really honor localized knowledge because the lands and ecosystems are so different, and then our cultural expressions are so unique and distinct. And yet there are kind of these underlying thematic principles like reciprocity, like honoring the ancestors, like thinking of future generations, like respecting the animals and plants that we have to harvest for our foods and medicines. So there are some of these, more global principles, and certainly love and affection and treasuring our relations. Often the word love gets translated as, I treasure you, I value you, I respect you. You have value to me. I give you my strength. I also give you my vulnerability. When I need your help, that's love being reciprocated. When you are vulnerable and need help, I give my strength. And that's part of that relational dynamic that's so essential.
And is that love also weaving through the rituals that might shape, well, even the day, the ritual you might begin the day with, or that you might use before various parts of the day, or actions during the day, as well as, I guess, the bigger festivals and gatherings or shifts in the seasons? Could you even? I mean, I love the example of the eagle, and flying high.
Yes.
And so, with that sight and sort of care kind of quality to it, if I've understood that right, would there be other animals as well as particular rituals that might be manifestations of the love? This would be very interesting for designers, I think, to even have, if there were two or
Yes.
three examples.
Exactly. Well, literally every morning when the sun comes up, I mean, I'm currently here in Akimel Atam, Peeposh territory in the Salt River Valley of Phoenix, Arizona, at ASU. And for the people of the desert, when that sun comes up, and many indigenous peoples, but it's very strong here, that to get up before sunrise and to pray and to be in a state of meditation, and when those first sun rays come and hit you, it is love. It is love from our Father Sun, emanating warmth and light and vision and, nurturing as well. And so that light, and the orientation of the sunlight is so key with all sacred architecture and sacred geometry. So that is key. Even the Western Apache here in the Southwest, when their women come of age during their puberty ceremony, could be anywhere between now 11, 12, 15. One of the things young women have to do is run to the sun at that dawn in an act, a ritual act of running to the light and to greet the sun and greet the dawn for strength and to receive all of that love and light from the sun. So, there's many different ways that we do that. For us, when we make offerings to rivers and the places where rivers enter oceans or lakes or larger water bodies, I don't remember the exact Ojibwe word, but it basically means love. When a river enters a larger water body, it is like entering that mother space, right? Even in French, la mer, the ocean, is called the Great Mother. So those natural features in the environment, they give us love. And when we see the eagle or a hawk, a bird of prey, we know that they're looking out for us and really keeping an eye on things, almost like we have a guardian. Different animals, every animal sighting is auspicious. And again, different tribes will have different meanings to these different animals. For the Ojibwe too, when we see turtles, that's really important. I come from the Turtle Mountains. The North America is called Turtle Island. It goes back to our sacred creation stories. We also know the turtles live a very long time. They're very wise. They're very slow. It's very auspicious when you see a turtle. It's like a reminder to kind of slow down, look inside, pay attention. Don't be in such a hurry. Maybe go into contemplation or meditation. What do I need to learn right now? Turtles are also great teachers of wisdom because they live both in water and land. So there's many, again, different meaning to different animals and sightings depending on the territory. So as designers, I would say pay attention to the first peoples on whose land you're on and go back to their stories and their original instructions. What does a bird of prey mean to them? What does a turtle mean to them? What does mountains mean to them? But from a lot of the indigenous peoples I've been so honored and privileged to meet, every plant, animal, rock, stone, the rising of the sun, the setting of the sun, the rising of the moon, and the stars, the constellations right now. Orion is showing up, the Pleiades, the seven sisters. There are hundreds, thousands of different stories and interpretations of ceremonies that happen now that the Pleiades shows up in the northern hemisphere, disappears in the southern hemisphere. And the same thing, the southern hemisphere, they have stories when the Pleiades start up. In fact, there's the first national indigenous holiday in New Zealand now, Matariki, when the Pleiades shows up, the Seven Sisters constellation. And it's a national holiday because they celebrate, that's a time of abundance, kind of relaxing, a celebratory time, the time of harvest, a real time of getting together with family, playing sacred games. So we're very earth based, but we're also very sky based and connected to the constellations, as above, so below. That's mirror image of each other. So there's that interrelationship. And when certain stars show up, we know certain plants will bloom or seed. We know certain medicines are going to show up, or it's time to plant. We can predict the climate, El Nino, El Nina, by looking at the color and, the color and the brightness of certain stars. That's the Quechua people of Peru and Bolivia who can really predict the climate by observing the stars. And they have like a 2-week festival just for them to, celebrate and tell stories, renew their trade relations, their agreements with each other. And then the elders determine the visibility of the stars and then predict their calendar and their agricultural schedule for planting and what to plant. So it's all connected, and it's all, from my perspective, certainly, I can't speak for all indigenous peoples, thank you, but I can speak for Ojibwe folks that it is definitely rooted in a worldview of love and reciprocity.
So it's very fascinating, just to pick up on the notion there of the microcosm and the macrocosm, because of my interest actually in pre-modern texts and ways of knowing. I've thought quite a lot about this and the way that it's interpreted in the modern world, because there is a kind of science, and by observing the natural world, there's a kind of knowledge of the ways of the natural world that might be thought of as a kind of science. Another way of thinking about it
Yeah.
is more metaphorically. So like you mentioned the turtles there, and turtles are slower creatures, and so that speaks to us in a metaphorical way. But I'm very interested, and I wonder whether this chimes with you, in pushing it in a slightly different direction, which is more about our participation with the natural world and how our self-awareness, our consciousness can share in different moods or moments, different forms of life. And so be prompted to become aware of a different kind of consciousness that's within us as well as within the world around us. So for example, I might look at the stars and I might see Jupiter shining, and the quality of Jupiter's light prompts a certain kind of awareness in me. And it's very different, say, from the quality of Venus's light, and where Venus is in the sky and so on. So it's that more, I don't know, participative notion of what the natural world can give us, as well as this sort of science, as if, the stars can be a sort of clock, or a creature might be a kind of metaphor. But there's something deeper going on, I would presume.
Absolutely, you really hit the nail on the head there, Mark. It's a participatory consciousness, a link to more phenomenological philosophy, if you will. Many indigenous folks, Dan Longboat, a wonderful Mohawk scholar, talks about imagination not being inside the human head and creativity not being inside the human brain. It comes from our participation with the beauty and color and shapes of the natural world, and that it's a porosity in human consciousness that receives symbols and metaphors, yes, and science, but it's much more something embodied, phenomenological, and we, might even say in the heart, right? Something, again, symbolically, something that touches our emotional world and our emotional consciousness so that we are able to feel like I am starlight, right? Not just that I'm receiving it and perceiving it as, oh, the scientifically or just metaphorically, but I actually become the starlight becomes me, it flows through me, and we join as one, right? And I think for many of us, love often has this quality of unity or of joining or of connection, right? It's not about separation, it's more about that participatory consciousness.
That's
So
very,
yes,
very
I
brilliant. Yeah.
believe that yeah, yeah.
I mean, again, it reminds me of how actually the words knowledge and love are deeply connected words in many languages. In fact, in the
Mm,
Bible, it might be said that Adam knew Eve, and there's that sense there in the sexual union of participation and joining, and it's the knowing, as in
mm.
familiar with, part of, not just standing back from and studying. So these links with love are really telling. Actually, it's not just a rather romantic add-on, but it is deeply connected to this form of knowledge.
Absolutely. And I don't know a lot about Christianity, but, I always had questions about, Adam and Eve and their love. That made sense to me as an embodied person. But, Immaculate Conception, I never really could quite grok it, understand it, but I heard the wonderful Sufi scholar Pirzia Anayat Khan talk about how Mary's love, his, very Sufi devotional interpretation, she was so filled with the love that was, we could say etheric or non-material, but so filled with it that it actually, impregnated her. It became form. The formless became form. And so I do think that there is a quality of that transformation that breaks down also this whole spirit matter dichotomy in the Western mind, right? That love can be so powerful that it is made manifest, like people miraculously healing themselves with tumors and cancers or whatever, but have some kind of spiritual transformation that actually dissolves their disease, right? That happens. So the power of love, of unleashing love, especially with all of our allies in the natural world for indigenous peoples, that's why we have survived genocide, right? We've actually been able to survive and in many ways thrive, in many ways still suffer from injustices, because we knew we had allies beyond human beings, from the eagle, from the turtle, from the redwood tree, from the saguaro cactus, from the starlight, right? And to live in that large cosmological dimension that is imbued with a loving kindness, as the Buddhists would say.
Yeah, I think that when you start to make the presumption that love might be say, a cosmic force, or at least something that's objective to us, of which what we think of as love in terms of our feelings is just a reflection, all sorts of other possibilities start to become, imaginable. And maybe that's partly what you're
Exactly.
touching on there.
That's right. That's right. And it's an antidote to the nihilism and isolationism of a lot of the modern malaise and dis-ease of modern society, industrial society. And that's why, again, given indigenous peoples, our lands have been taken, our religions were taken, our languages were taken, so much was taken. We live in dire poverty in many places, but we have this nucleus and this, profound understanding of love being a cosmic universal force, and that comes to us from the natural world and from the universe as a whole, that really strengthens us in terms of our embodiment and our survival, and to thrive and regenerate.
Another phrase of yours that stood out for me when I was reading around before we spoke, referred particularly to the erotic. And I think this is another
Mm,
area that's really
mm,
worth thinking about, because it's got rather contracted in the modern Western imagining anyway as the purely sexual. It stood out for me because you talked
yeah,
about an early experience or memory as a child of eating the earth, and you ventured that this
yeah,
was even a kind of erotic experience. And it stood out for me.
yes.
And again, I could half imagine what you might mean there, but how does this open up that sense of love as well for us?
Well, I think thank you for reading that piece. Yeah, it's one of my most read pieces about the erotics of place. And I want to reclaim that word, like you said, eros and eroticism, not purely a sexual act at all. It's connected to more of our sensuality, that participation, that phenomenology, and it really breaks down again that boundary between the spirit and matter, or the abstract and the embodied, when we're actually able to, taste earth or touch a tree, or feel, a mountain or a rock, a granite stone. And we receive a certain energy from those beings, right? They're not dead beings. They are filled with, you know, all kinds of minerals and cells and all of this life hidden in them that emerges, and it can awaken our senses just like sensuality does, or love does. It like awakens our senses, and that we feel a unity, we can feel a connection, we can feel a reciprocity, we can feel a presence. It's a lot about being in the moment and being in the presence, in the nowness, and feeling this energetic exchange happen, that to me is very stimulating. And that's why I call it kind of an eros, because it's stimulating. It's also relaxing, but it's like, it's life affirming, I guess I would say. It's a really life affirming connection with the natural world that I've been very fortunate. I've just organically had my whole life. My native mother reinforced it. Even my Norwegian father reinforced it. He was very much always with wood and leather and stone and metal. And like, he was very much a craftsman, and always got a lot of energy from the more than human world, or the non human world. And so I think that we would be healthier people if we imbibed or were more honest about those connections, right? We're often embarrassed about them or would never admit them. It's very much considered an odd kind of reality for some people. But I feel that from my tribal perspective, it's a natural birthright to feel that deep, loving connection with the more than human world. To quote David Abram in his great book, The Spell of the Sensuous, who also writes a lot about this connection. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that book. Um,
Yeah.
you mentioned the tendency towards anthropocentrism, and I wanted to link that with ecology, because in a way that the nub of my question is, what is the role of the human then in this wider ecology? And because it's not hard to find ecological writing that sees the human as the problem. But I'm wondering whether you can help us with a sense of the place of the human, and even whether love has a role to play here. I mean, my musing on this might be that we, it seems, have a kind of self intentional capacity to love. We have a particular kind of choice in the way that we relate to the natural world, in a way that perhaps isn't the same as other creatures, certainly, and then other plants and minerals that you're mentioning there, it seems clear as well. So my sense is that the way that we love the world and engaged in this relationality doesn't just matter to us, but it might actually somehow matter to the rest of the world as well. And not just in the sense of not doing it damage, but something more positive, something more, I don't know, organic or joining perhaps. Now, look, I don't want to sort of run away too much with my sense, but do you see what I mean? Does what you're talking about give
Yeah.
us a positive sense of the human place in all this, and not just a condemning sense?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, even the great, entomologist, Harvard biologist E.O. Wilson talked about the biophilia hypothesis, right? That humans actually have an innate evolutionary biological affinity for the natural world. But sadly, somewhere along the way, we can analyze where we took a wrong turn, Judeo Christian religion, the way science was created, and patriarchy, and the Industrial Revolution. People became then biophobic, right? Ooh, spiders, ooh, snakes, oh, this is good. Humans are elevated above the natural world, above animal, and the human exceptionalism became kind of dominant. And so that has been so destructive and antithetical, well, destructive to the natural world, destructive to other peoples, brown and black peoples, and destructive to even the patriarchal, white supremacist worldview, because lacking and cutting off from so much love and community and connection that could be available. And so I do think this revolution, this love revolution, as Fetzer Institute is embodied, trying to enact, this love revolution has great power. You don't protect anything unless you love it. Right. That was E.O. Wilson, and many great environmentalists and conservationists and scientists say we cannot protect something if you don't love it, and you can't love something often if you don't understand it, or if you're not even open to learning from it. So to me, like, getting back to knowledge and love, learning is really key to this. And I like using active verbs, learning or ways of knowing, because knowledge can sometimes be extracted, turned into like a dead thing, and then, like, money, it can be, deposited and extracted. The Paulo Freire, banking model of knowledge and education has been really not that great for a lot of people. But ways of knowing, keeping open to learning, even in our indigenous traditions, we have this concept of learning spirits, that we have different spirits that come to us at different ages, different experiences, different times in our life, where we awaken these different learning spirits, and we must be open to them because it's time to learn something new. So that goes back to one of our Ojibwe seven grandfathers teachings, which is humility. Right? I think love and humility are also deeply connected. It's hard to love something if we're not open. We don't have a certain vulnerability and certain respect. So, yes, joy and love and beauty are integral, and designers can create homes and buildings and schools and hospitals that are much more loving and inviting, that represent this kind of openness and porosity, and with lots of green and, plants and animals and natural stones, curvilinear and asymmetries. And I think that really evokes and provokes more of a organic openness. When things are so regimented and linear, our minds and our hearts become regimented and linear, and not as open.
And do I detect in there as well a sort of synthesis possibility of, say, Western ways of knowing with the indigenous? Because, modern ways of understanding science does bring benefits. And maybe I can
Absolutely.
make a kind of parallel. Um, I've read people working within the Judeo-Christian tradition actually have talked about how a notion of husbandry rather than, say,
Mm,
exploitation can actually now be
mhm.
informed by the discovery of science. And of course, ecological science is very
That's right.
sophisticated about these things and can illuminate how that relationship might actually be re-established and rebuilt. Do you see something of that sort of weaving together with bringing the indigenous awareness alongside the awareness that comes with modern science?
Absolutely. I'm not doing a shameless plug here. I just completed, working on a podcast called Knowledge Symbiosis. And Indigenous leaders are talking with biologists involved with biomimicry, and designers talking about ecological design. So, yes, I believe in knowledge symbiosis. I believe that these knowledges are already integrated in some ways and can be further integrated with greater ethical considerations. And this fancy concept of epistemic justice, right? How to bring different epistemologies together, because we do know there has been epistemic violence with some worldviews dominating, erasing, exploiting, extracting other worldviews and ways of knowing. And so that has to be addressed and reconciled or healed or repaired before there can be really true knowledge symbiosis that is equal, respectful, and reciprocal. But yes, this is my life's work, really. I work at a university with a bunch of scientists all the time who are interested in embracing indigenous science, indigenous ways of knowing. So I'm consulting with the US government, the Department of Interior right now, also around the same theme. So this is our time. This is our moment to really try to do this in a much better way, because I think the world needs it, humanity needs it, the earth needs it. And we don't know if we're going to make it through or not, but this is what we need to do. So this is my life's work. And I do have faith and belief that we can get there. I've been involved with interfaith work off and on for decades, and I've met many folks from many different world religions who are very open to this and very excited about it. And I work in the field of religion and ecology, which is also a really exciting area.
Well, look, Melissa,
But it's hard work.
yeah,
I want to say, but it's hard work.
yeah.
It's not
Well,
easy work. It's
Maya,
what we need to do. Yeah, it takes a commitment. Yeah.
and maybe that's why love really matters, actually, because then love becomes a kind of power that keeps you at it, because you know in your being, as it were, in your body, as you've been talking, the value of all these things, and the desire to bring them together is very necessary when things are very tricky and difficult.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you, Mark, for this very stimulating conversation. And I love the way you think. And I'm very honored to be invited to talk with you and talk to your community, designers. And I love the field of ecological design, biomimicry design, incorporating these principles. I live right next to Frank Lloyd Wright building, and so have really studied his design principles as well, which embody a lot of these um, qualities. It could be called loving environments and loving landscapes.
Well, look, Melissa, thank you so much for sharing so richly with this welter of engagements, and I hope it gives people a lot of imaginative leads, but also the sense of how lovely they can be in all the ways that that word can
Yes,
resonate with us. So thank you.
absolutely. Well, Chimigwich, that means deep heartfelt thank you in Ojibwe language. It's wonderful to be with you today.